Thank you very much, Dr. Laila, for the detailed presentation. It was really interesting for me and the case study for the sugar cane. Thank you very much for this. Now we will move to the panel discussion, and we will have an additional speaker at the panel discussion, Engineer Karim El Saba. Engineer Karim El Saba, he's a Reliance investment company. He's a consulting in the management and digitization of the business. He joined Reliance Investment in 2002, serves as the group executive vice chairman, and he holds a bachelor degree of mechanical engineering and a master's of business administration from the American University in Cairo. And please welcome with me Dr. Shireen Fahmy. She will be the panel moderator for today. And Dr. Shireen is the consulting in the management. Dr. Shireen, she's an adjunct faculty at SSE, the American University in Cairo, co-founder, board member, and treasury at the Egypt Green Building Council. She's Chief Executive Officer of Eco Strategies for Sustainable Development. Please welcome with me Dr. Shireen, and the floor is yours, and welcome with me all the speakers to the panel. And then we will have like a 30 minutes of a panel discussion, and we will start our first break at 1 p.m. at Alfie Hall.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for having me as your moderator today. I am very honored, very happy to be here with everyone. Welcome to our conference, and welcome to our panelists. So let me, because of course we did not have the pleasure of hearing Engineer Karim talk with us. So let me start with you, Karim. Your organization, Reliance Investments, is planning to expand all over Egypt, aiming to help the nation in solving different environmental issues. Now, let me ask you, which issues are these, and what will you prioritize and why? And maybe that would give us a chance to know more about your business.
Thank you. First, I have to tell you, and I'm very happy to be back at the AUC. AUC is a home. I'm also very honored to be on this panel. And I'm also very honored to be with Dr. Haggar. Dr. Haggar was my teacher, my professor, a long time ago. And it's such a pleasure to be back and to discuss such an important topic. Let me explain to you what do we do. So Reliance Investments, we are primarily a solid waste management company, and we are handling different types of waste. Let me take them by order. So we do municipal solid waste treatment, we do agricultural waste treatment, construction demolition waste treatment, and industrial waste treatment. And the four are interlinked because they all fall under the premises or under the domain of decarbonization. That has led us actually to change the name of the company recently, and this is something I can let you know about at the end of my very short speech. So basically, municipal solid waste treatment, the lack of treatment has enormous impact on climate change. So you've got the solid fraction and the organic, or the inorganic fraction and the organic fraction. The inorganic fraction is mostly the source of alternative fuel to the cement industry. And when you really think about it, RDF, or alternative fuel for the cement industry, has been the driver of the waste management industry in Egypt in the last 10 years. It constitutes around 20-25% of the municipal solid waste, and this is where Egypt has a serious lack of solid fuel for the cement industry today, after the end of the subsidy of natural gas to the cement industry back in 2014. The other municipal solid waste, which is the organic waste, the organic waste constitutes around 60-65% of the municipal solid waste, and there are major impacts of not treating municipal organic waste. Of course, you've got the methane emissions, you've got CO2 emissions, you've got leachate contaminating underground water, and the cheapest way to handle and to treat organic waste today is to do composting. There are a lot of challenges. I will leave the challenges at the very end, but regarding municipal solid waste, it's the only two products today are RDF and compost for agriculture. The benefits of compost are major. As Dr. Daly was mentioning, it's a great replacement for inorganic fertilizers, but also compost has another very important impact, which is saving water. So compost is saving 30% water when used irrigation water. I was discussing yesterday with Dr. Hani that from an irrigation point of view, compost has a very important impact on sustainability when it comes to water shortage. Agricultural waste, the big problem with agricultural waste is the cost of collection and transportation. Again, Dr. Daly was talking about sugarcane, but sugarcane waste is extremely light to transport, and it's spread over the density is not that high when you look at the waste generation. And the problem then becomes how do you transport it and how can you economically use it, and in most cases not economical. Even composting is a problem for agricultural waste because you need space, and farmers need the land to produce crops. They don't have time to use it as compost. The only viable thing we have found to treat to treat the biomass or agricultural waste is to shred it, compress it, and also use it as an alternative fuel for the cement industry. We have started a pilot project for construction demolition waste. I'm very proud to say that we are the first, I think the first successful project to have achieved this in Port Said. Today, I need to mention this, but Reliance today is treating around 400,000 tons of municipal, agricultural and construction waste, both in Port Said and Ismailia. We're producing around 170,000 tons of alternative fuel to the cement industry, around 100,000 tons of compost. But the construction demolition waste is specifically very important to the green building initiative. And of course, you can produce aggregates. Dr. Sally mentioned a lot of examples on where is it used, but let's face it, in Egypt, we have huge challenges in the adoption of such recycled aggregates today in concrete, or in the use of such products in the cement industry as substitute raw material. The mindset is very different today. We are a very traditional country when it comes to using construction building material, and the building code in Egypt also is an extremely challenging factor. Today in Egypt is not allowed still to use recycled products in construction. And this is going to be the greatest impediment to the green building initiative, actually. The last challenge I want to mention, and I've taken a lot of your time, but treatment of waste is extremely expensive. The capex that you have to put today to treat municipal solid waste or agricultural waste is extremely expensive, and in most countries, where waste has to be treated and landfilling has to stop, the government or the municipality has to pay a treatment fee to cover the gap between the revenue that comes from the products and the cost of investment and operating the treatment facility.
Thank you very much for that, Karim, and let me get back to you in a while, asking you further about that. But let me go to Dr. Hela. So, Hella, you discussed with us net zero rural communities. Now, a major concern most people think to the shift to net zero rural communities is maybe perceived complexity and other factors. In your opinion, how can we convince rural communities and the government to make improvements in this sector?
Yes, so usually the major concern is complexity and cost. And this is the idea of the waste to business model that we're proposing. We want to focus on having simple technologies that are easy transferred to residents of the rural communities so they can learn how to do it themselves. And the second thing is to be that the technologies that we're proposing to be simple and affordable. So this is another point. And when we talk about costs, people always tend to think about the initial cost, but there is another cost that is not directly related, cost that we pay because of the diseases, because people are living in polluted areas, costs related to all the environmental degradation that we are facing. So to convince people, we need to showcase, and this is the purpose of being in a conference like this one, to showcase that there are simple technologies, affordable technologies that could be implemented in rural areas.
Thank you for that, Hela. And let me go to a different but somewhat related with some overlaps, and that is net zero construction demolition waste, Dr. Sally. So your research interests include slum development using zero waste concepts. What made you decide to tackle that subject?
Actually, two of the most prominent problems in Egypt are slums and waste. So I was thinking maybe there was a simultaneous solution to both problems together. So relying on the concept of industrial symbiosis, like Dr. Dalia mentioned, we can use the waste of a process to be the fuel for another process. So I was thinking to focus on we focused on construction and demolition waste recycling. We used one of the materials of construction and demolition waste, and we recycled it with a simple process so that the slum dwellers living in the slums can actually use this process and come up with a product that they can sell for money. So it's empowering the slum dwellers themselves and at the same time recycling some of the construction and demolition components. We applied this in a case study at Manshayat Nasser, where we did the recycling for gypsum board waste, and we came up with a brick that can be used as a substitute to the normal red brick. So it was an idea to just use both problems simultaneously, relying on the industrial symbiosis, and come up with a product that can be beneficial in solving the problem of waste and at the same time empowering the slum dwellers.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Let me go on to Dr. Salah Al-Haggar. Concerning net zero organic waste, now we know that the amount of organic waste generated in Egypt is estimated to be 100 million tons per year. What is the impact of the current practice on climate change, in your opinion?
Thank you, Shireen, for this point here, because as a matter of fact, it is 100 million tons, but just a few minutes ago, Hala mentioned something else, where the amount of animal manure is about 60 million tons or 63 million tons. And this adds another dimension to the organic waste from the municipal solid waste, from the agricultural waste, from industrial waste, etc. And therefore, this organic waste, if you leave it without any utilization, it will be fermented. And the fermentation of organic waste will emit huge amount of greenhouse gases, especially CH4 and CO2, and therefore it has a major contribution to climate change. And I think this is very important to think about utilizing the organic waste. Organic waste, as partially mentioned by Karim, it can be converted into organic fertilizer, and also presented by Hala and Dalia. That's number one. Number two, the organic waste classified into green and dry. The green organic waste, like banana leaves, for example, it can be converted into an animal fodder through some kind of technology called slag. And I think in Egypt we have almost about 20 plants producing slag out of green organic waste. And it's very, very profitable. That's number one. The dry part, it can be converted into organic fertilizer. And we have so far 40 to 50 plants in Egypt. What we need is to have thousands of these plants scattered all over the country. That's another one where organic fertilizer, not compost. Organic fertilizer, it's an excellent substitute to the chemical fertilizer. And that's another added value to the climate change. A third part, where it is organic, the organic part of the garbage, it can be converted into not only organic waste, but also it can be converted into a protein to feed the fish and to feed the animals. And this is something started almost in China and in Europe and in the States almost about 20 years ago. And I think if we will be able to utilize this 160 million tons, this will solve the problem of the national economy.
Thank you, Dr. Salah. Very inspiring as always. Let me now go to Dr. Dalia. So, what type of waste to energy technologies or methods are really applicable to Egypt, taking into consideration that the nature of our waste is that it has up to 60% organic content?
This is an interesting question because as an environmental engineer or an environmentalist, I would go to waste to energy as the last resort. I come back to waste to energy, but you have to start with the sustainable energy options first. Could you utilize this organic waste as food? For example, the food waste that's coming out from the different restaurants and so on could go to food for another, unprivileged community. And then you go to the feeding the animals, as Dr. Salah said, producing silage and so on, or silage. And then going to the option of having fertilizer from this organic waste, and then utilizing it as fiber, and finally utilizing it for fuel for waste to energy. So it shouldn't be, we shouldn't have something promoting waste to energy per se from as a first option. It should be the last option. And then when you look at it as the last option, you have to take into consideration what you just said, 60% organic, and Engineer Karim would agree with me, that's high moisture content. So incinerating it directly to produce electricity, for example, may not be the best solution because it's not wise to use energy to produce energy. And Karim could second me in this. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Dalia. But let me follow up with you with a second question based on that. Then, in your opinion, who is making the biggest advancements towards net zero in industrial waste and otherwise waste? Who are they and what are they doing right?
If you look at the industrial waste and looking at the net zero, some of the practices that we have in Egypt is very beneficial, and it comes because people think of waste as a business. For example, people already collect PET to produce, as I said, fibers from PET to use for carpets. The paper industry here, it's almost closed because almost all the waste paper that is, not contaminated is being recycled in the carton factories to produce cardboard, fluting, test liners, and so on. So it's very good. And there were a number of initiatives that they were initiated by the Ministry of Industry and Ministry of Environment to having waste exchange in some of our industrial areas, like 6th of October and 10th of Ramadan. So they created an inventory of all the industries that were there, the waste that's coming out, and if there could be a waste exchange program. And I think there is also an initiative now to turn some of our industrial parks to eco-industrial parks. So this is another initiative for this way to, industrial ecology.
Thank you, Dalia. And Engineer Karim, let me get back to you. So let me go back to my initial question about your goals for the future. What are your priorities when you're thinking of now expanding your business in Egypt? How are you arranging those priorities and why?
Okay. Egypt is producing today around 22 million tons of municipal solid waste. That is today the estimate. Of course, this has never really been weighed, but this is the estimate based on different generation models. We have our own internal generation models, and the numbers are a bit less. So the numbers are probably going to be from 15 to 17, 18 million tons because of the rural areas generation that is much less than what you will have in cities. But whatever the number is, the amount of treated waste today is not more than 10% nationwide. So we're talking about, we're handling around 450,000 tons. There is another maybe 1 million tons among different players. The number will not be more than 10 to 15%. The areas in Egypt, the governors in Egypt that are extremely heavily populated have an enormous challenge today dealing with municipal solid waste. When you take the Delta is home for around 45 to 50 million people today live in an area that is only 20,000 square kilometers. This is an area that is considered to be the food basket of Egypt. It is completely lined by irrigation canals and has almost non-existent treatment infrastructure or disposal. So they don't have landfills, nor do they have treatment facilities. There are very small facilities, and the only exception would be in the Ahliya, where not all the waste is being treated, but the rest, it's quite a bad situation. So for us, as a company that is extremely interested in decarbonization, the Delta is an obvious target to set up and to invest in new treatment facilities and in disposal facilities in landfills. At the same time, you've got an industry, again, and I want to stress on this, the cement industry is a perfect venue and a perfect resting place for a lot of waste. The way a cement plant is designed, the furnace of a cement has a very high temperature, it can degrade any kind of waste, and all the waste at the end ends as part of the cement. So there is no landfilling requirement in cement. Alternative fuels and RDF is an extremely important resource today for the cement industry. The cement industry today is importing 6 million tons of thermal coal from abroad. This has a huge impact on the emissions of the country, and it also has a huge impact on the USD reserves of the country because it costs a lot of money, this steam coal coming from abroad. RDF coming from municipal solid waste is a perfect local fuel, and it does have a huge impact on the emissions level of cement produced.
Thank you. Now, let me go back to Dr. Hela. Hela, you are certified to be an ambassador and official trainer of sustainable development by Egypt's National Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development, and that is the training arm of the Egyptian Ministry of Planning and Economic Development. Now, my question is, how do you use your position to further the drive to net zero?
Okay, so thank you for bringing this up. I had the honor to be selected to attend the Be an Ambassador initiative. And this journey allowed me to understand more. I was more into the engineering part and the technical part of sustainable development, so to really understand the social and the economic part as well. This was very interesting in this initiative. And I invite also, and I encourage also all young professionals and young people to attend such initiative. And there are a lot of initiatives that are done by our government nowadays, as we were talking yesterday. And after this journey, it allowed me to implement sustainable development in different aspects. The first aspect was in my professional experience and life. I'm a mechanical engineer at Dar al-Handasa, so it allowed me to really ensure that all the designs that we offer to our clients have minimum sustainable development or minimum sustainability strategies and that are implemented. So this was one part. And the other part, of course, was to try to, through giving training courses, attending conferences, also webinars and seminars and so on, to really try to raise awareness of people all over Egypt about the importance of sustainability and sustainable development in all our aspects of our lives.
And best of luck with that, Hela. Thank you. Let me go back to Dr. Sally. So, Sally's net zero construction and demolition can be quite intimidating to most people. And of course, we see that with all the construction and demolition waste lying around. So for people to change, that can be quite intimidating. What are the easiest ways for businesses to get started?
Like Engineer Karim just said, the main problem in Egypt regarding construction and demolition waste, one of the main problems is the building code and the vision in general of not using the recycled materials in construction, in new construction, thinking that they are of less quality. So this is mainly the problem. But it has to start, everything has to start with the government, with new regulations allowing to use the recycled materials, giving incentives like tax incentives to contractors for using recycled materials, actually, encouraging contractors to prefer to use recycled materials than the raw materials. That's it.
So it really has to start from the top. Yeah. Okay, and the financing gap. Yes. And of course, again, it's sort of a top-down approach. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. Dr. Haggar, let me get back to you. What is your message to our youth? And how do you think we can help our youth to accelerate transition to a green and smart future?
I think that's a very important point, because again, the future is mainly directed towards sustainability, and try to make all your activities integrated with the concept of sustainability. That's number one. Number two, net zero. It is located at the top of the hierarchy of the sustainability. Without net zero, you will never be able to approach the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Then the message is try to integrate the concept of sustainability, mix it with the net zero concept in all your day-to-day activities.
Thank you, Dr. Salah. And let me please present just one final question to all of our panelists here. And if we could just answer this in just maybe one or two sentences in a minute. So here's the question. If you could share just one idea with the audience that would be the most important for them to remember about what we've discussed today, what would that idea be? And let me start with Dr. Dalia.
Okay, related to what I was presenting, when you take a decision in terms of options of treatment or options of handling any issues that could have an environmental impact, take life cycle assessment into consideration because, for example, somebody would say, for example, renewable energy is better than fossil-fueled energy. The decision also has to take into consideration life cycle assessment, for example, of what happens to the use of batteries when they're depleted that are used for storing renewable energy, as an example. So take life cycle assessment into consideration, and remember sustainability is not only about environment, but also social and economic factors that have to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalia. Dr. Salah, one final idea.
I think I would say waste is a resource. Just a few minutes ago, during this session, now we came up with the total amount of waste generated within Egypt is about 200 million tons. If you consider these 200 million tons as a resource, I'm sure you will find a lot of job opportunities. You will stop importing a lot of materials and export a lot of raw materials, and therefore keep this in mind. Waste is a resource.
Thank you. Sally, one idea, please.
Actually, talking about construction and demolition waste recycling, it's a win-win situation for everyone. The contractors will benefit from using the recycled products, will minimize the carbon footprint of the whole construction process, will use the recycled materials and minimize the use of natural resources. So it's the time to act, like we said yesterday. But in construction demolition waste in specific, the government plays a huge role. So they have to,
It has to lead the way.
Exactly.
Thank you, Sally. Hela.
I would say collaboration between all stakeholders, the researchers, the private sector, the policymakers. Collaboration, I think, is important. Yes.
Yeah, that's key to everything, really. Yeah, thank you, Hela. Karim.
I'm lucky I'm the last one, but I can build on one Dr. Haggar just mentioned. So waste is a resource. It needs, however, investment for it to be a resource. But when you look at the circularity, at the end, you make much more money. Two clear examples, municipal solid waste treatment, only on alternative fuels, the country would save a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars today in the imports of coal. On construction demolition waste, you're saving two things. You're saving virgin raw material, but there is also another aspect that was not mentioned today. The quarrying business in Egypt is one of the largest consumers of subsidized diesel. When you're producing aggregates, you're using diesel. We have a mining company. We know how much it costs to produce a single ton of virgin aggregates. We estimate that the amount of diesel used today in Egypt, subsidized diesel, is more than 1.2 million tons of subsidized diesel a year just to produce the annual usage of aggregates in Egypt that can be mostly replaced by recycled CNT.
Thank you, Karim. Do we have time to take some questions from the audience? All right, so maybe we can take... Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think we can take maybe one or two questions.
And I have just one comment. Can we have the questions in Arabic for the panelists? If someone wants to ask the question in Arabic, it's okay?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you for the full panel, and it's a very rich panel. And these conferences are to mend the gap between academia, industry, and business, and government. And the gap in waste is huge. Concepts mentioned by yourself about industrial ecology and resource recovery, which comes together, sustainable use of waste, C&D, and the waste management part, we have major gaps in Egypt. So I would like to ask the panelists to shed some light on, first of all, the idea of using waste as fuel is as old as the 90s. Countries like Pakistan, which have a very similar agriculture system to us, is using biomass waste as fuel and other solutions since 2005. The whole sub-Saharan Africa depends mainly in their heavy industry on biomass. We are talking about substitutions that reach 50, 60%. Biomass, mainly from rice and wheat, is already concentrated in one place because of how it's agriculture. So collection is not a problem. But still, in Egypt, we are behind that. This is from the biomass side. From the C&D side, as mentioned by you very clearly, it's an opportunity. It's pending on the code, and it's not a new idea, and it's being used in many countries of the world. So my point here is academia and business need to work on replication with the government to ease on policy, because it's not a novel idea. It's a replication of what's being done. So instead of trying to find a complex way of doing things, we need to copy the easy implemented solutions and then innovate further. As you said yesterday, innovation was what's stopping sustainability. But innovation is related to maturity. We need to start first, move on the easy hanging fruit, and then move forward. So I would hope that the panelists would shed some light on this direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Very insightful question. Delia, would you like to begin with that? Yeah.
Delia was the government,
Hello. Okay. Just the point on the biomass, as you said, actually our agriculture, the rural communities have been using biomass since long time ago in their ovens and so on. Remember in the past, so they know that they could use biomass for sure. And there was a very good initiative that is taking place also in our rural communities to use biomass and biodigesters to make methane that is used instead of the butane bottles. And the good approach for this is that they still have the composted material that's coming out of the biodigesters, which is used also for the soil. So this is one of the good approaches of using biomass in our rural communities. But again, if you said we have a lot of rice straw, let's shred it, briquette it probably as you are proposing and use it as a source of fuel. Again, if it's not feasible to be used for other things like fiber and fertilizer, yes, why not? But it needs an infrastructure for collection and use. Or maybe the initiative was done by the Ministry of Environment in the rice straw, and now there is a price for the rice straw. It's not wasted anymore. Dr. Haggar can correct me here if I'm wrong.
I think this is a very important point. And tomorrow, inshallah, we will have one presentation to address the solution. But just briefly, I think in Egypt, we have, unfortunately, isolated islands. We have one island with regulations. We have other islands with the commercial plants for municipal solid waste, for construction, demolition waste, for industrial waste. Very successful plants, but we don't have a networking. And to do that, we have to have what is called a champion. Champion is the key issue behind the success of all this kind of work. I remember just about 15 years ago, I read a PhD thesis in the United States about the role of a champion. A champion is a catalyst among all these kind of islands to develop a networking and promote some kind of social interactions with some kind of technology transfer. But this issue is a very, very important issue, and we will have tomorrow one of the presentations address this issue, because for me, it's really amazing to have regulations and you have commercial plants, and we still have some waste everywhere. Dump it in the water canals. Yesterday, Dr. Hani Suelam, Minister of Irrigation, he said, even after lining the canals, we found huge amount of garbage. Throw it on the water canals, not only polluting the water, but also, develop some kind of a bad image about this area. And, of course, promoting some kind of diseases, etc. But I think this is very important, and I'm sure when we get into the role of a champion presentation tomorrow, then this will handle a lot of, not concern, a lot of problems.
Thank you, Dr. Salah. The point that you just brought up about the champion also highlights what Dr. Hela just said a few minutes ago about the need for collaboration. Yeah, so it's all one theme, really, that's very important to get things done at the end. Thank you for that. Do we have time for another question? Are we? One more question, okay?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the very informative panels and the past couple of hours. My question is, from what you have said, we look like that we are living in a gold mine of waste in Egypt. And it can have all the solutions for a lot of our problems. The question is why the problem still exists. So from what you have said, this can be bankable projects, it can be measured, we can get all the fund we need. Why it still exists?
Thank you for that question. Karim, please.
Type. Waste is not a treasure, okay? Because this has always been said. A very small part of waste is valuable, which we call the recyclables. And the recyclables, with the PET bottles, aluminum cans, this is only 5% by weight of your entire waste stream. I'm specifically here talking about municipal solid waste. However, for waste to become a resource, you have to do three things. You have to do the investment for treatment facilities. You have to cover the gap the government would need to pay for the service or the treatment cost. That has to be done. And third, you have to have regulations. I'll take one example. For example, alternative fuels for the cement industry. We've been operating since 2015, but we never made money before 2022. And the reason is the cement industry did not have any incentive to use that fuel, and the cement industry had to invest a lot of money in feeding systems in their own cement plants. So you have to prepare the ecosystem, and the champion idea that Dr. Haggar mentioned is very valid, because when you look at the C&D, for example, construction demolition waste is a resource, but you cannot make money today on C&D because you don't have the market for it, and producing it is expensive, and the market perception for that recycled aggregates always makes it sold at a much cheaper price than virgin material. So it's not a straightforward, because if it was a straightforward resource or a straightforward value, if it had value naturally, it would have been used. But it does need capital, it does need regulation, and of course also it does need innovation. There is a lot of innovation needed in knowing how to process which type of waste. There is no fit for all answer. It's not always very simple.
Thank you very much, Karim. And thank you very much, everyone. I think our time is up, and we're ready for a coffee break. I would like to once again thank our esteemed panelists here, Dr. Salah Al-Haggar, Dr. Dalia Nakhla, Dr. Sally Gizawi, Dr. Hela Omar, Engineer Karim Saba. Thank you very, very much for joining us for this panel. And let's all remember that this is the future. waste is a resource. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shireen, and thank you for the panelists. Thank you very much for the audience. Let's start our first coffee break at the Alfie Hall. Please join us for the networking break, and please come back at 2. The session will be starting at 2 p.m. We will have a session from 2 to 4, and then the last session will be just 1 hour from 4 to 5, and then we will have the lunch. See you at 2 p.m. in Basili Hall. Thank you.